and you may have gotten a little pop-up message. So anyway, welcome to the January 2022 meeting of the El Paso Trans-Pecos Audubon. Today we're joined by Dr. Vikki Milne, who's going to be sharing some photos about our recent trip, our August trip to Kenya and Tanzania. So, oh, you know what? I need to let you.
I can share.
Yeah, sorry. I just this. Okay, you should be able to share.
In honor of finally doing our Africa presentation, I had to break out the shuka from Kenya, which is colorful. Kevin has the least colorful shuka available. Traditional Maasai wear. And let me share. All right, so hopefully everybody can see that.
Yes.
Maybe a little bigger and get that out of the way. Okay, so our trip to Africa this summer was instigated by a veterinary friend that I made over some Mexican wolf work. And she said I should join her group that goes to Kenya and does these rabies vaccine clinics. And it turns out she is part of a group called ANAW, African Network for Animal Welfare. And they do, it's an African group based in Nairobi, and they do a ton of different animal welfare projects on everything from wildlife. They do wildlife work, they do domestic animal work, agricultural work, lots of different projects that kind of touch on, and then legislative advocacy as well in Africa. So they're very active. They're based in Africa, and she became involved with the group, and there is now also an ANAW USA. So she is part of the Denver branch of this African group, and she does an annual trip to do rabies vaccination clinics in Kenya in some of the rural areas. And this is to vaccinate domestic dogs and cats and donkeys. So I went to Kenya a little ahead of Kevin, and he joined a week later because his thing is not vaccinating dogs and cats. And it was intense vaccination clinics. So this was our bus and how we traveled. There were about 15 of us, and all of that stuff had to go on top of the bus, which magically it did, thanks to Patrick, our amazing driver. And this is what we looked like as we traveled. And this is Eunice, who took care of us. She was our fixer. She took care of all of the little problems that popped up traveling through Africa with 15 foreigners, and all kinds of complications arise. So Eunice was amazing, got us out of all kinds of pickles. So we started in Kenya around Nairobi, and did a week of vaccinations in one area and then a week of vaccinations in another area further down towards Voi down here, which is called the coastal area of Kenya. And it's very close to Tsavo National Park. So we did some Tsavo National Park safari after doing vaccination clinics there. And then we went back with the group, and kind of our reward for doing 2 weeks of intense long days of vaccinating hundreds of dogs and cats and donkeys was a 3-day safari on the Masai Mara with this group. And then Kevin and I continued into Tanzania with Julio. So we would drive out into the rural countryside in Kenya. It was, I mean, beautiful areas, lots of subsistence farming, meeting tons of people who would bring their pets. These kids all got out of that tree incredibly fast when we threw a soccer ball into the field. And so they were very happy to see us. And we would use whatever was available at the little villages we went to. So we split up into 10 groups. We had folks from the the Kenyan Agricultural Veterinary Service and folks from Africa helping us. And we always had to have somebody with us who spoke the local dialect, because the basic language is Swahili, but there are hundreds of dialects of it throughout Africa that all the different tribes and groups have traditionally spoken. So going from county to county and little village to village, they would speak fairly different languages. And so we tried to have somebody from that area with the group working in that area. So it would just be 1 or 2 veterinarians, a couple of people from Anna and the county, and some other volunteer helpers that came with the US group. Not everybody in the group were veterinarians. And we would set up our shop, draw up a bunch of vaccines, and then the people would come. They had for a few weeks, so they knew that we were coming. And dogs, mostly dogs, came with kids. They came on motorcycles. Cats came in bags and crates. Puppies came in bags, buckets, boxes, on chains, following people. All kinds of just whatever we could vaccinate. We were trying to get as many of these animals done. This guy was one of my favorites. His name was Eric, and he brought us back, I think 9 dogs. He brought 2 at first, and then he was like, can I bring another? And we said yes. And then he did that again. And we were like, how many do you have? And he said 9. And we said, well, just, yes, you can bring them all. So Eric brought all 9 dogs eventually. Just, these people, these are owned pets. I think they may be running around, but they actually belong to people, and the people do really care about them. And they're proud of them. So we give them leashes and collars when they get vaccinated. The donkeys were quite a challenge. We had a lot of donkeys some days. And we would always, at the end of the day, give away some donated like knit caps and dolls. We were giving away leashes and collars as we went, and the kids this was winter in Kenya, so it a little chilly in their judgment, and they really loved the knit hats. They would just be dying for some knit hats. We gave away some masks and stuff too. Everybody was trying to stick to COVID precautions. And then I tried to indoctrinate them into the world of birding. So that was also fun with the kids for them to try out binoculars for the first time. They had a lot of fun. We did some cultural and other ecological center visits. So this was at an elephant orphanage that had 2 locations, one for the little guys and one for the older guys. It was around Tsavo National Park, and they were rehabilitating orphans to be reintroduced into Tsavo and join the elephant herds in Tsavo. It was really incredible. These rangers live with these elephants, and they spend years getting them from anywhere from 1 to 2 years old up until they can live on their own, and that might be over 10 years and find a herd in the park. So they would take the older elephants out with them to protected areas of the park. They would forage and eat like a normal elephant all day, and then they'd bring them back into a safe area at night for everybody to sleep. And this is how they came back in, which was just so fun to watch. They were in a huge hurry. So when it was time to come back for the day, they were really excited because that meant it was dinner time. And these guys were still getting a bottle or 2 of milk from the rangers when they came back home. We stayed at some wildlife lodges as we were driving out during the days to do these rabies vaccination clinics. We ended up vaccinating, I think it was over 7,000 dogs, and that was dogs and cats and donkeys. And that was among 10 groups of veterinarians, including Kenyan veterinarians, going out every day for a couple weeks. So it was really impactful. And these places are all around Tsavo Wildlife or Tsavo National Park, and vaccinating domestic animals for different domestic animal diseases is how we protect lions and wild dogs from things like canine distemper and rabies. So it's not just for the dogs, it's for the people. There are a lot of people in Kenya and Africa who die of rabies every year, and it's for the wildlife too. So the lodges were really nice. We had some posh accommodations, a little balcony area here to hang out after a long day and have a beer. The Segala Lodge was proud of how many birds that they had, and they had watering areas and stuff. So we got to see things like these go-away birds, white-bellied go-away birds up close and bathing. And they had a ranger who would take us out on walks. So we got to do kind of little mini daily safaris in the morning if we were willing to wake up early enough and do a walk before we drove out into the middle of nowhere for rabies vaccination clinics. So these are some vulturine guinea fowl. Saw some big flocks of guinea fowl, vulturine, as well as helmeted, but I don't think we have any good pictures of the helmeted. On blue, they come in two varieties in the area we were in. There's also a red-cheeked variety that has a little red spot. There was a watering hole near this lodge that we could do, that they would take you on a walk to, and there were spoonbills and Egyptian geese and wading birds and stuff there, and egrets, lots of egrets. This is one of the most spectacular birds that we saw, but unfortunately the lighting's not great. But this is the golden, I think it's golden, yeah, golden-breasted starling. With this, it has this really long tail, and they were just beautiful, but the light was not cooperating when we were taking pictures. There was other wildlife. This was actually in Nairobi National Park. Right when I got off the plane, we did a little afternoon safari. So water buffalo and impala and hartebeest. This wildebeest, there were wildebeest and zebra and giraffe right on the grounds surrounding the lodge. That was amazing. And one of the fun things to see everywhere are the weaver nests. So there's tons of different weaver species, and they all make these cool nests. This is a white-browed weaver, very fast and little and hard to get pictures of. This was a tinkerbird, red-fronted tinkerbird. We also saw some black-throated tinkerbirds, but I don't think we got as good pictures of them. And woodpeckers, there were beautiful woodpeckers. This is a Nubian. It's a female because she has the black spots on the front of her crest. The male has the red going all the way to the beak. And there are, I think, like 8 to 10 different species of similar looking olive and olive greenish and redheaded and tan to white with different spots and stripes woodpeckers. So this was that Nubian woodpecker female again. And this is a little cardinal woodpecker, very similar kind of coloration, but he was smaller and not as speckled. The Abyssinian scimitar bill, this was a really cool bird with this. He's at a little bit of an angle, so this bill is like longer than it looks in this picture. They're very cool. The flora and fauna, other things, we were looking at everything. So we enjoyed birds, but also the plants, some of the insects. We saw stick insects and things, and lots of reptiles as well. This is I believe this was a gray-headed bush shrike. So there are a few different species of bush shrike. So this guy was really cool. He was right around the lodge. And a green-winged petilia. Africa, going to another continent is like, it's so challenging because you'll be like, what is that bird? And they'll be like, oh, it's some kind of petilia. And I was like, what is a petilia? I don't even know what that is and what category it goes in. There are just all these categories of birds that don't even exist here in North America. So it was fun. After the rabies clinics, we moved on to Voi Wildlife Lodge, which is a bigger, like more posh wildlife lodge. And we were able to bird the watering hole right from the pool, which was awesome. And we took advantage of 2 days in a row. And then we did from there, that lodge is right on the edge of Tsavo National Park. And so then we did some safaring into Tsavo. And Tsavo, it had a lot of grassland type habitat. Tsavo is famous for its red dirt. And so a lot of the animals that like the elephants and the warthogs look red in Tsavo. And this was a pair that came right up to the watering hole in front of the lodge and drank water that evening. Lions came up, lots of different gazelle and antelope come up as well. There were wading birds hanging out around that watering hole. The yellow-billed stork was one we saw pretty frequently in multiple areas around Kenya and Tanzania. The woolly-necked stork, not quite as common, but we saw them frequently in that area as well. This was an African gray hornbill. I think it was the only gray hornbill we saw. There were several species of hornbill, but and then the yellow-billed hornbill we saw near that elephant orphanage, and that was a really very cool bird. And then the red-billed hornbills were some of the most common. We saw lots of red bills, and they would be on the ground and up in the trees and very active, smaller little bit smaller hornbill. This was one that was on the ground. The Namakwa Dove, we fell in love with these guys. They're just so tiny. They're like a little Inca dove size with the black markings on the face and a colorful bill. Really cute little doves. The secretary bird, we were so excited with the first secretary bird. And then later we got to see a couple different groups of multiple, and we saw secretary bird flying, which was just all really cool. So secretary birds were just so fun to watch. There were so many raptors and some of them very difficult to identify. Like that's because there are some that they're just very similar looking. This was an eastern chanting goshawk, one of the more common ones that we saw in Kenya. That's another view of that guy. They had pretty long legs, these chanting goshawks. Of course, we were also watching the mammals, and I think this is a Grant's male, maybe a Tommy. This guy's definitely a Grant's gazelle. And impala. We were super lucky and saw African wild dogs or African painted dogs. Those are very infrequently, they're hard to see unless you go to some, usually in Botswana, people are targeting, they'll go to Botswana to see wild dogs, they're more common. But we were able to see wild dogs in Tsavo. And the veterinarian that was with us who organizes these trips every year, she's done this 8 times and she'd never seen wild dogs. So we felt super lucky to see them. They definitely had some hair problems. We were, of course, it was a busload of veterinarians or a couple of trucks of veterinarians, and we were all discussing the differentials and possibilities for why these guys had poor hair coats and hair loss, but they seemed to be, they were still in good shape, just bad hair. Little dik-diks were everywhere, little miniature antelope. We had lunch at, I can't remember the name of this place, Kevin, if you can remember. But we had lunch at this big flat river area with lots of little waterfalls and very cool rock formations. We were sitting around having lunch when a hippo came out of the water fairly close that we hadn't expected there. So we had to choose some different rocks to finish lunch. We had a rarity while we were there. So this was a greater flamingo, which was well out of their normal range. So he was too far north and shouldn't be here. He was all by himself. So we photographed and documented him, reported him, and we felt super cool for having a rarity while we were in Kenya. This was a bat hawk or bat falcon, sorry, I think. This is an immature and yeah, bat hawk. The mature would have more dark under the chin. This guy flew over while we were at that river spot. There were lots of swallows there. We didn't get very many good pictures of swallows, of course, but this one was perched and it was a really cool one. It was a wire-tail swallow. It had this very tiny little plumes coming out of the tail. This was the hippo that surprised us. And I loved some of the warning signs. They were always very polite. Please do not disturb the crocodiles by walking down to the water's edge. Like, never mind that they will kill you and it's really dangerous and stupid to walk up to crocodiles, but just very politely, they would have signs that said, hey, please don't bother them. And so this was off the top of a big cliff face that we were looking down on the river and at the crocodiles and the hippos. This was a yellow-necked spurfowl or francolin. The name changed, I think, from francolin to spurfowl. Or spurfowl to francolin. I don't know which way, but it's one of those. And we had some other grouse type birds. This was a black-footed or black-faced sand grouse that was taking a bath with a few other. This was an immature hawk eagle that I'm actually still not sure exactly what it was. I don't know that we actually reported it as anything because we couldn't determine, but it's immature, it's spotted. So I was thinking either an Ayers or a Cassins. The Ayers would be more common, Cassins would be rare, but the Cassins are the ones with spots. So I need an Africa bird expert to confirm that one. We'll have to submit that one on eBird with a photo to see if anybody can confirm it for us. We had battler. Whoops, I meant to move the battler. We have more battlers later. We had saw lots of mongooses or monkeys. I don't know. There are several different species of mongooses. They're super cute. One of the campgrounds we were at when everybody was gone during the day on safari, this like big troop of like 50 mongooses would just walk around, hop around, cleaning up anything that people dropped and looking for food and stuff. But these guys, they were living, you could kind of see some burrowing down at the bottom of this deadfall wood. And they were living under there, and we just sat there and watched them. And it was like every 30 seconds, 2 more would hop out. And it was just like a clown car, endless mongoose. This was a little Hyrax being adorable, eating some leaves. There are lots of shrikes and fiscals that are different combinations of black and white and sometimes brown or rusty. So this one was a cool one. It's a Taita fiscal, and so it was just it has a smaller range. It was just up in the area that we were working around Savo, so that was pretty cool. And of course the lilac breasted rollers that everyone is forever trying to get the perfect picture of the roller, but stupid branch. Primates also, so baboons, especially near any of the gates to the parks, and they would totally raid your car. If the safari vehicle top was open, they would come in and steal food. So you have to watch out for baboons. You don't want to mess with them. And this is a little baby hitching a ride on mom. Also some guenons, another primate. We had to hop in a tiny little plane to get from Nairobi out to the Masai Mara. Oops, I'm gonna have to open the door because my cat is making a lot of noise banging on the door. You're about it. There you go.
Hey, Kevin, are those parachutes on your back?
Probably would have been more comfortable if they were. There were like 10 of us in this little plane, but we made it. This was on landing, so we were super happy.
We made it.
We made it. And so while we were at the Mara, this was the 3-day like really luxury safari vacation. So we got to sit under trees out in the middle of the plains with another truck would come up and bring lunch. It was just ridiculous. It wasn't always smooth sailing. We did have to do several river crossings, and luckily we had enough people that we had 2 safari vehicles. So when we were hours away from camp, and the first vehicle did the river crossing and went over the hill on the other side and discovered there was a big ditch down on the other side and got stuck. We had to go down the river several miles and find another crossing and come back to tow them out, but we made it. And then we would sit around the campfire at the end of the day and talk about all the awesome things that we saw, and have some drinks and some popcorn and dinner. So the Masai Mara is similar to the Serengeti, a very big grassland, little areas of shrubs and forest in the grassland. I just love this picture because giraffes are huge, and these guys just look so tiny on the scale of this landscape. We're of course aiming to see migration. There's a kind of a circular migration that goes on as animals follow the fresh grass and the rains, and that's what everybody goes to see. You get to see the big herds of the herbivores, and then all the carnivores are following along, picking them up. Ostrich, of course. This was a common ostrich. There's another species that we did not get. Zebra there. We took a lot of pictures of zebras looking for this perfect little pose. Warthogs with babies, these were adorable, running around. Lions generally being lazy and lounging, usually having made a kill and eaten overnight, and so they would be laying around during the day. This is my little lapwing and plover section. I fell in love with lapwings and plovers. I think they're underappreciated, but in Africa there are so many, And they have so much attitude, and they were super cute. So this was a crowned lapwing. This was the Senegal Lap Wing. This is a Waddled Lapwing, very cool. Not a lapwing, but another little ground bird for open areas, the Temminck's courser. And his very cool nape, just such a nice little crown he has. The Spurwing Blackwing, these were really common. This is one of the most common. And there was a pair here nesting right at the edge of a river that we had to cross on a little stone bridge, leaving our camp every day. So we got to watch them nesting. Unfortunately, the rains came and the water rose and their nest was washed away. So that was very sad. We had watched him for like 3 days. This was a really cool confrontation that we saw, and this little Senegal lapwing was just continuously vocalizing at this Tommy gazelle that was trying to, we weren't sure what was going on, but he's protecting a nest. There are eggs here, and we don't know if the gazelle was actually interested in eating the eggs. Obviously they're herbivores, but sometimes weird things happen. But he was just right up in his face, and he just stood there yelling at him and protecting his nest as the gazelle was trying to check it out. So the gazelle just sat there with head down, and the bird just sat there leaning on his forehead and yelling at him for several minutes. And this was the little nest that he was protecting, he or she. Like I said, that we did get a lot of rain while we were at the Mara, and some lovely rainbows. There were plenty of critters who didn't mind the rain, so we did still go out in the afternoon in the rain. Hippos. We saw Leopard Tortoise, which was like, I was thrilled. We were all super thrilled. This was an emotional roller coaster of a sighting though, because they're hard to see, and it was raining and muddy, and he kind of blended in. And one of our safari trucks, there were 2 safari vehicles because there were enough of us. One of our safari trucks saw him first and pulled over and was looking at him. And of course, anytime a safari truck pulls over, the other truck pulls up to see what's going on. Well, they didn't see the turtle, and they became within inches of actually driving right onto it. So they were driving very slowly, and we were trying to wave our hands and tell them to stop, and they just weren't understanding. And we all thought we were going to see the turtle get smushed, but he survived. He was a very lucky tortoise. This was the Africa Paradise Flycatcher. This is the female. I think Julio had nice pictures of the male in the previous talk. The male just has a much longer tail. There was a hyena family that lived right outside the camp at the Mara, which was pretty awesome. We got to see hyenas, and well, we heard them every night, but we got to see them pretty frequently as well. There are several species of bustards out there on the grasslands. This was a white-bellied bustard, and this was a different guy, but they were very defensive and would vocalize readily. And they, like, if you did a callback, they would call back with you for, like, as long as you wanted, but they were not shy. He put his all into it. And then there were also black-bellied bustards. There was another buff-crested that we didn't get pictures of. This is another ground bird, a Coqui francolin. And some other ground birds. We had redneck spurfowl, just really pretty red skin on their necks and their legs. And when we were in Tanzania, this is not in Kenya, but I pulled this picture up next to them just to compare them. This was the gray-breasted spurfowl, which was a Tanzania endemic. So that was really cool. We got to see those guys. Southern ground hornbill, one of my favorites. So this is what it looked like sometimes when folks spotted something interesting. Lots of cars lined up on the roads with all the safari vehicles. And these animals just kind of go about their business like nothing is happening. It's amazing. But this is what everybody was watching. There was a group of 3 cheetahs who had made a kill and were feasting. They were all walking away with very full bellies by the time we got there. And the vultures and wood storks started circling and coming in for that kill, or not wood storks, Marabou storks. I just love the goofy marabous landing. And then these are white-backed vultures. we've got several vulture pictures here. So that we had the usual suspects at the kills after the carnivore left would be the Marabou Storks, the white-backed vultures were the most common, and then this guy with the speckles and the bill that actually is more yellow is the Rupaul's Griffon. So another vulture, a little less common, but still a good number of those. And then the smaller one, there were hooded vultures. So you can see they actually have feathers up on the back of their neck more thickly than the other vultures, but they were also noticeably smaller, so you could pick them out. This is another one of the Rupauls. You can see that light beak was the field mark basically that really helped pick them out of a crowd of vultures. But sometimes there would be 40 or 50 on a carcass, and you could find all kinds of different vultures. It was really neat. More white-backed. And then the biggest vulture that we saw was the lappet-faced vulture. They're just huge. They're a really impressive bird, and they have these pink skin with folds and a little bit of purple skin on their face. Amazing vulture. Of course, there were more lions everywhere, being majestic mostly, and then sometimes being silly. Cheetahs, we saw, I think we had like 15 to 17 cheetahs total, including the cubs that were with some of the moms, but this one had killed a warthog piglet. She seemed to be a female alone that had killed a warthog, killed this piglet. And she was very wary, looking out for lions or hyenas to come steal the kill. They were the cheetahs, when they had a kill, were always very alert, but we saw more cheetah hunting than anything else in successful cheetah kills. And here's some of the herons. There are lots of herons. Most of these were all the black-headed, and there are also gray herons that look a lot like our great blues. The saddle-billed stork, super impressive bird. A little brown-backed kingfisher, or brown-hooded, I think, kingfisher. Just a little bit different than the gray headed kingfisher that we'll see later. This is a babbler. It's an arrow chested, I think, or arrow marked babbler. And they were just really cool. They'd be in large groups and they babble, they talk, they were vocalizing constantly, all kinds of contact calls to keep in touch. So you could hear them pretty far away, but they were really neat. Another fiscal. So this is a gray-backed fiscal. This was a pretty common one. So this is not in the same park, but another pair of gray-backed fiscals. Very much like our shrikes. And this was the yellow-throated longclaw, really beautiful, like a meadowlark when you got them in the light, and they acted like meadowlarks too, so really similar type of bird. Big groups of elephants out there in the Mara. This family liked to hang out in the area near like our camp. I think this is the picture when we were very close to our camp. So our camp is in the kind of shrubs in the back. And this elephant family would be really nearby sometimes. Lots of youngsters, very rambunctious. Eland were less common. They're the biggest antelope and just really impressive to see, but finally got a good picture of one. And topi were fairly common on the Mara as well, a really neat looking darker antelope. This is a gray kestrel, so a little guy. But similar colorations to the chanting goshawk, and there's another kind of goshawk. There's like a whole group of 8 birds that all are the same, like gray with red or yellow legs, and just got to tell them apart by size and little minor differentiations. A white-browed cuckoo, like a big cuckoo basically. They were pretty slinky in the shrubs and didn't always come out nicely to pose, but we got him there. And then this was one being more slinky down on the ground. This is a little speckle-fronted weaver. It's a very sparrow-like weaver that we saw lots of them foraging down on the ground like sparrows. And then there was a whole group of cisticolas, which drove us crazy. Cisticolas and fox or larks. There are just dozens of species that all look very similar, and you can only tell them apart by their vocalizations. And they gave us huge headaches. And by, after a day of driving, like, the guide would be like, "Oh, bird," and we'd be like, "Cisticola," like, with disdain. We don't want to talk about cisticolas. I loved seeing the giraffe were really neat. And then, of course, there were, with the big animals, there were oxpeckers. These are red-billed. little fuzzy zebras. And with the zebras, we had some yellow-billed oxpeckers. These were starlings. They're wattled starlings. They're not in full breeding season, and so we didn't have any to actually have a wattled, but they develop like a little skin flap fold on their face that's pretty cool. But these are wattled starlings. They behave a lot like the oxpeckers, so they were hanging out on the wildebeest looking for bugs. This cheetah had a group of cubs that we'll see over here, but she had, I think, 3 or 4 cubs, and she was on a termite mound looking out for dinner, I'm sure, constantly trying to feed all those guys. And dinner would look something like this. This was a Tommy gazelle that we actually saw, our guide saw from a ridiculous distance. And just due to the fact that it was a female by herself and there was a male nearby kind of standing guard, he suspected that it was giving birth, and we drove up and he was right. There was a wet, brand new newborn, and we watched it actually take its first steps. So that was pretty crazy. This was little dude on lookout. More yellow-billed storks and sacred ibis and Hadada ibis at some of the wetter areas. Superb starling. I think Julio had great pictures. This is a very similar one. I put them next to each other, even though these weren't from the same park, just because this was the Hildebrandt Starling, really similar to the superb, but without the white band. This was a banded martin. I believe this is the reed buck. There were a couple of species of antelope that were neat, that lived more down in the riparian areas close to water and were more shy, not in big groups, and they were more solitary. So, and one of them was this reed buck. We watched this cheetah with her cubs for a while. The little cub was super playful and licking mom's face. She had 2. And then he decided to gnaw on mom's ear. We also were on the lookout for hippos out of water because it was so rare to see. So whenever we caught a hippo out of the water, we were really excited. More lilac-breasted roller. This was another species of go-away bird, the bare-faced go-away bird. This is a juvenile eagle that I am not sure what species. I think maybe a booted. So again, I need an African raptor expert because there were lots of immatures and they're really hard to tell apart. So not sure who he is. I think that's a different individual that is the same species. And this was an immature martial eagle. Super cool. But you can see on both of those birds, they got full crops. I think they've been hunting or scavenging, eating well. And black-winged kites were pretty common. We saw lots of black-winged kites, really pretty bird. More lions. We drove down to the river looking for, which was a very long way actually from our camp, but hoping to see some of the river crossing of the herds. Hippos hanging out. This was a little hippo croc face-off. This hippo already has a giant scar on its side. I don't know if that's from another hippo or from a croc, but that was a tough customer. And then little guys lounging in the sand. So we did catch small groups going across, just a few zebra and then a few wildebeest made a crossing with those, the crocodile, right around the corner over here. So definitely risky business. And then we were finished at the Mara and we had to make the crossing over the river into Tanzania. So at this point, we crossed into Tanzania, which if anybody wants to try it, talk to us because it's complicated to do it via a land crossing instead of just flying back to like Nairobi and flying into Kilimanjaro. So anyway, we can talk about that if you are interested. But right across from the Masai Mara is the Serengeti. They're continuous grasslands. And so we were crossing into Tanzania and started our safaring in Tanzania at Serengeti. And then we did the circuit that everybody does, the Ngorongoro Crater, Lake Manyara, Tarangire, and Arusha National Parks with Julio and his guide. We found Julio. So that was, Julio was full of cameras. And this was basically us for the next week, hanging out in our safari vehicle, taking lots of pictures, seeing lots of birds. The Serengeti had more of the Kopi rock outcropping, so that was cool. There you could, find different birds in there, and lounging leopards and lions resting during the day, so that was pretty neat. There were also some wetlands in the Serengeti, lots of hippos, and that's not mud all around those hippos, that is hippo poop. This eagle, I think, was on the way into Serengeti while we were doing the drive around from Kenya. And I think it's a Wahlberg's eagle based on the little crest that it has, but otherwise it might be a tawny, which is more common. But he just really had a pronounced crest, and it made me think he's a Wahlberg's. Little silver bird, this is a flycatcher that was fairly common in the area. And these white crested shrikes were so friggin' adorable. They were pretty common, and they just tended to hang out in groups, and they loved to cuddle. I don't know why, but they were really communal little guys and noisy. There were little bee eaters. We had another species of bee eater, the cinnamon breasted, that had just a darker brown chest. That was at a different park. And leopards, we were able to see a few leopards in Serengeti. Fisher's lovebirds, white-headed buffalo weaver, their bright red butts. This is a cool one because you can see, just like our hummingbirds, the iridescence and the reflecting feathers make all the different, like position makes all the difference. So when they turn their head, you can see and better ID that guy. This was a scarlet-chested sunbird. Hippos. Anywhere there's water, there were hippos. Myers parrot. This lion, this was a young lion. His pride was all lounging in the shade, and he was just goofing around in this tree, like looking like he couldn't get comfortable, but he didn't want to get down. The long-crested snake eagles were really fun to see with their like super long crest off the back of their head. And then this guy just was very judgy. We saw a couple of servals, which is unusual. They're harder to see, but we did get a couple of good sightings of the serval. And then this leopard had a juvenile, an older cub that was following her, and there was a lot of drama. They briefly got separated. She went over to a different rock. The baby didn't follow, but then there were safari vehicles in the middle who didn't realize that the baby was on the other side. It was like a soap opera. Soap operas on the Serengeti. But they were eventually reunited and figured it out. This was a Burroughs eagle owl. I believe this is the largest owl in Tanzania, in East Africa. And we saw a couple of them, but this one was in the tree where we were taking a bathroom break. And then these are some more battlelore pictures. This was the first battlelore we saw. Actually, it took me a while to figure out that it was a juvenile battlelore. And I was so excited that we saw a battlelore. And then, later we saw several more adults, much easier to identify and really striking looking. This was in multiple parks. I just put all the battlelores together. This little guy, I'm not sure what this was. It was either some type of snake eagle, and we'd have to check Kevin, I'd have to check the other pictures to see if we have his chest, but with the yellow eye and the white belly and the coloration, he looks like either a snake eagle or a cuckoo hawk. More lions lounging around. As we left Serengeti to go to Ngorongoro, we kind of were doing this circuit backwards. Most people start at Arusha and go towards Serengeti. So this was the overlook of the Serengeti as we were leaving it at the crossing out of one park area into another. This was a greater kestrel. There are several species of kestrel in Africa, and so we saw the gray, and then we also saw this greater kestrel, who was really distinct because of his white iris and yellowish creamy iris. He was just actually on the road between Serengeti and Ngorongoro. At Ngorongoro, like, I was just blown away by the landscape of Ngorongoro. It's a giant volcanic crater, and there's kind of grassland and wetlands down inside the crater. The rim of the crater is at pretty high elevation, and basically has clouds all the time. So it's like cloud forest up here, and it was cold. So we were camping up there. You could near the rim. When we were down inside, everywhere you looked around on the horizon, you could see the clouds coming over the edge of the crater. It was so weird. There was a lot of traffic on the way in, mostly four-legged. We had pelicans. I didn't actually look closely at these to confirm if these are the pink-backed, or there's two species that I think we had to worry about. But pelicans in there. Cattle egret on a hippo. Lots of these little mouse birds they're really appropriately named. They kind of slink around on the branches and their long tails kind of look like mouse tails following them around. So they really do kind of look like little rodents hopping around in the bushes, but really cute. This was a speckled, and there's also a blue naped that we saw. I was really excited about this guy. These little white eyes are just so crazy looking with their bright eyes. And this was Buru, I think. White eye. And again, there's like 8 different species in there, just differentiated by slight differences in the size of the white around their eye and what elevation and habitat they're in. So it was just really, really neat. This whole trip, I just loved how all of the parks had very unique habitats. So, we had grassland, we had cloud forest, we had wetlands, and temperate forest or more dry forest. So everywhere we went kind of had its own feel and ecosystem. And of course, the birds are going to reflect that. So just the diversity was incredible. And this was a 2-line, I think an eastern 2-line forest. I lost track of my notes, but I think it's like a 2-lined forest sunbird. And that was pretty cool because again, that, we could determine that based on the elevation we were at and the small range of these little individual different guys. Sunbird. In the crater, there was a pretty good flock of gray crowned cranes. You can see the immature with the presumed parents. It was windy. There were ostrich, common ostrich again with the pink necks and legs, as opposed to the other species has gray neck and legs. Cory Bustards, we saw Cory Bustards in multiple places, but this was a really cool picture of one chilling in the grasses, weeds. After our amazing time in Ngorongoro, we had to hit the road like these baboons. This is what we would see coming down the road sometimes, and it was like, okay, are these nice baboons or are these truck raiding baboons? But basically away from the gates, they were very, they didn't care about the people. They would just wander on. Near the gates, those guys had figured out that people have food in their trucks. So these guys just passed us by and looked at us. So this was, so that road and these pictures are now in Lake Manyara, which is basically like at the time it was super flooded. So some of the species that people typically go here to see, we couldn't see because it was too deep and the water was way up into the forest. So it's forest around a lake, and right now, because they had a very wet season, the lake was pretty flooded. But this was a striated heron, like very similar to our green heron, short legs and stalking just like that. And then we had more southern ground hornbills, but these guys, there were a couple that were actually up in a tree and moving around on the tree, and then they would go down to the ground and also be hunting around on the ground. Hammercop, one of my favorites. We didn't see a nest though. They make enormous nests, but that would have been cool. Barbets, these little yellow and red barbets. We spent a lot of time watching them and trying to get the perfect picture. They moved a lot. This was a group of 3. There were a group of 3 on this termite mound. And so this was an awesome picture because he actually got a termite. This is a little emerald spotted wood dove, 2-spotted or emerald spotted wood dove. And this is the gray-headed kingfisher, so really similar to that brown hooded kingfisher that we saw earlier. So there are several species of kingfisher, and they were they were really cool and exciting to see all the different kingfishers. This was a beautiful little ground bird, the three-banded courser, sorry, not three-lined. Three-banded courser, who was kind of out at in an area that was more open near the edge of the water. And then wood hoopoes. While we were actually close to leaving, I think, the Lake Manyara Park, a large flock of wood hoopoes was just carrying on and flying all over the place in this tree. Unfortunately, kind of far away, but Kevin and Julio, I think some of these pictures might be deja vu because, of course, Julio also had beautiful pictures of these birds. But maybe with repetition, you guys, everybody can learn the birds of Africa before you go. This one was cool. They were eating the berries off of these shrubs, and you can just see him popping a berry in the air and popping another berry, grabbing little fruits. And this was the bushbuck, the other kind of secretive riparian antelope that we saw. They were really neat. This sunbird was in a tree full of sunbirds and I think puffbirds or some other. It was just randomly along the road on the way between Lake Manyara and Tarangire. But I don't know, Kevin caught it in a really crazy position. And then we hit Tarangire, and Tarangire was another neat park. It had a big wetland that we drove out to. It had a couple of watering holes. It was more dry forest. It was really arid in some areas, and then you could get down to a wetland. But it also had lots of baobab trees. We got up before dawn to go down to the wetland because it was a long drive, but we wanted to see the birds down there. Got some nice sunrise pictures. And this is the wetland area. So this is all kind of vegetation in the water. This was a very long, narrow lake area. So we kind of drove along and saw all of the waterfowl and shorebirds in here. And my favorite and the one we were the most excited about was the Goliath heron. Super cool. Like, these are spurwing geese, so also a cool waterfowl. The spurwing goose is the largest goose in Africa, and we have one at the zoo, and his name is Hans, but they are big, and this heron is way bigger than those geese, so he was just huge. We were really excited to see that guy. And we saw him at the very end when we were leaving that wetland. We like turned off like right around there. There were some wildebeest at one of the watering holes. Another Varro's eagle owl, like really nice eagle owl. And the only white-faced vulture that we saw flew over while we were in Tarangire. Another gorgeous lilac-breasted roller. And another lovebird. I think this might be the black-headed, another lovebird. This was a Van der Dekken's hornbill, which was actually one of the most, we saw a lot of them in Kenya as well, but didn't get very good pictures, but this guy posed much better for us. The moon rising near baobab, that park was the park with all the baobab trees. And then our last stop, I'm almost done, I swear, it's so late. Our last stop was Arusha National Park, and that is close to Arusha, which is a pretty busy little city, and near, you can see Mount Kilimanjaro from there as well. It's really pretty. So it was more mountainous, high elevation forest with some wet areas and grassy areas. The big attraction here was the flamingos. So there were a couple of different lakes here that had big groups of flamingos, greater and lesser. This picture didn't come out as well. These were mostly lesser. There's a better focused image of a lesser and some greater. So the greater, they're bigger, they're a little paler, and they had pink beaks, and the lessers had the dark beaks. Oh, I can't remember the name of the stilt, but really similar to our black-neck stilt, obviously, but without as much black on its head. This was the squawko, I believe, heron, which is actually, I think when I looked it up, it's actually an endangered species. That was really cool to see. And also in this park, a big attraction are the colobus monkeys. So, you know, if you like mammals, not just birds, these guys are so impressive, just gorgeous big monkeys with giant, long, hairy tails and mantles. And the hornbill that was most common at this park was the silvery-cheeked hornbill. So he's got a big, this is a big hornbill, and he had a big casque and these grayish feathers on his face. I think that picture is actually from a different park, but it was a good picture of an individual. And we watched for a while. There was a, I think it was a type of avocado tree, like little tiny, I think it was avocado tree, type of tree that had, that was fruiting, and the birds were just going crazy in there. Lots of hornbills and other birds were hanging out in that tree. And this pair were doing a lot of displaying. So we could just watch them do their crazy displays and vocalizing to each other. So that was a really cool pair of silvery-cheeked hornbills. And this is the end. I finally actually made it through all the pictures. Only 3 minutes over 8 o'clock. If anybody has any questions, feel free.
Thanks, Vikki.
That was beautiful. Wow.
Thanks. It was an amazing. We were there for a month, so there are a lot more pictures.
Okay, next month.
Hopefully these are the best of them. So you know, you don't want to sit through all the other ones. Thanks to Kevin. Most of the pictures are his. So Kevin was the one who tackled learning a brand new camera so that we could have a really nice camera going to Africa and get some really amazing pictures. So which he did.
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah, you did a really nice job.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for sharing. Those were super.
Yeah, I'm happy to share that. Like, we took all these pictures and saw these amazing birds, and I love being able to show other people who actually appreciate them. While we were on safari, like all of the other people on safari, of course, are just looking at mammals. So they're just there to see elephants and leopards and lions and anything else they're not really interested in. And whenever we would be stopped looking, it was hilarious. Every time we would stop looking at a bird, because it was just the three of us and we were into birds, which was just great. And our guides, most of the guides really we were just lucky enough to also, both on the Mara and with Julio, we had guides who knew the birds pretty well. And like on the Mara, the guides used to do bird tours, but they just don't have as much demand for the bird tours anymore. And they just mostly do mammal tours. And they were stoked to have people that actually wanted to look at the birds. But every time we stopped, of course, it's just like vultures, like one safari truck stops, all the other safari trucks come from like the horizon and swoop in to see what you're looking at. And we were so disappointing to everyone. It was great. Like they would come drive up, and the Swahili word for bird is ndege. And so anytime a safari truck would come up, they would talk to our guide, and all our guide had to say was ndege, and they'd be like, it was hilarious. So that was kind of our catchphrase for, you know, just being a nerd and being interested in something that nobody else cares about, or people are like, what are you doing? Nothing. It's just like, ndege, it's bird. Nobody cares.
Maybe I missed this, but what is a Mara?
Oh, the Mara is just a name for a grassland north of the Serengeti, right on the Kenyan border. And it's called the Maasai Mara because it is managed by the Maasai people. So it's a protected area. They do herding there. And so it's called the Maasai Mara.
Okay, thanks.
It's basically the northern extension of the Serengeti.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it was wonderful. Thank you. I've got to leave.
All right.
Mm.
Have a good night, everybody. I don't know. Kevin, did you want to close it up?
Yeah, just if anyone has any other questions, we can stay on a little bit longer. I will mention, you know, we went with Julio, and one of his goals is to take more people. He loves Tanzania and the people that he works with, and our experience with him and the tour company that he works with was great. It was a driver / guide, a cook, and the three of us. And it was pretty reasonably priced. We camped for probably half the nights, which is not, it's more expensive, I would say, than US. It's probably like more like Yellowstone, Yosemite style prices.
Well, it's also tourist prices versus local prices. So
Right, yeah.
if you were from Tanzania, it wouldn't be so expensive,
But still pretty reasonable. Getting over there is certainly the most expensive part. But I know he goes pretty much every year and would love to see more people go. And we highly recommend. We'll go back. I don't know. The plane ride's a bit of a nightmare. It might be a few years before I'm willing to do the 15-hour flight again, but to get halfway there.
yeah. Kevin's tall enough that I think we need to like hit the lottery so that he can fly first class.
Yeah. But otherwise, just everybody keep your eyes out for the emails and the Facebook posts. Obviously, you all got the message, but if for some reason you're not getting emails, let me know and we'll investigate. But other than that, everybody enjoy the rest of your evening and month, and we'll see you in February.
Thank
That
you,
was
Vicki
wonderful.
and
Thank
Kevin.
you so much. It was
Thanks so
fabulous.
much.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Thanks,
thank you very
everybody.
much. Bye-bye. Thank you.
You're
Bye-bye.
welcome. Very welcome.
Bye.
Let me know if you want to